Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Rudman. Welcome to our 25th film in, in the series, Let's Go to the Movies at Home. It's Cabin in the Sky from 1943. This is an important film. It's one of only two Hollywood movies made in the 1940s with an all-black cast. And it's a film I'm betting most of you have never seen before, but in a few minutes we'll find out if I'm right about that. Great performances, great songs, so much to admire. And it's another one of those sharp turns in the road that we love, because the film we did 3 weeks ago was Hans Christian Andersen. I mean, goodness gracious. Our new participants should be reading this slide right now because it's going to tell you how to participate in the discussion, not just by using the chat, which is wonderful, but also making sure that we see you on Zoom because we want to see your pretty faces. And if you are a first timer, for heaven's sake, send Colleen Clement, a new member of our staff, send Colleen a private message so we can add you to our mailing list. And now our guest co-host for Cabin in the Sky, the one and only Treva Offit. Hi,
Hello,
Treva.
everyone. Hi. Good evening, all. I hope you are all well.
And Treva, every time, this is the second time you've done one of these with me, you always look gorgeous and you always make me feel underdressed. So, but it's great. You're keeping up our stellar appearances. But look, seriously, when I say one and only, I'm not kidding. Because for those of you who did not see Treva when she co-hosted Stormy Weather with me, you may not know Treva is an actor, she's a singer, she's a dancer, a choreographer, a writer, and a teacher at Laurel School. And as I said in the intro, we are so happy to welcome you as we did in March. You're a new trustee of the Musical Theater Project, so we're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much. As always, I am honored to be here and to share in wonderful art with all of you. It's good to see some familiar faces.
Yeah, we have a lot of familiar faces with this program, that's for sure. I can see some of them on screen right now. So as I mentioned, you last co-hosted Stormy Weather with us, another classic musical with an all-black cast, and we've started a new tradition since then, Treva, which is that we do a two-part survey. So I'd like you to lead our survey.
All right. Are you ready for survey time? We are going to start with the first question, which is, was this your first time viewing this film?
Yeah.
Oh, look at the numbers. Wow.
We'll wait till we get to the final result, but this is pretty much what I predicted anyway.
Whoa, 80%. This is your first time. Well, welcome, welcome.
So you want to move on to the second question?
Yes. So the second question is, did you like the film?
I love to see the scale kind of move.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
It's very exciting, really.
Wow. Okay, so 89% of you liked the film. We have a couple new, we're balanced out with no and neutral at 5%.
Okay, I always translate the neutrals to like. That's my own bias, I think. Anyway, it's always wonderful to hear your responses. And I should say too, we have been laying on you a lot of movies that are not well known, such as this one. But we're going to toss you some carrots pretty soon and toss you some movies that you do know very well in the coming weeks. But you keep telling us that you like adventures. So we provide you with those adventures, don't we, Debbie? I mean, you're a great witness to that. Yes, thumb up from Debbie Schinker. We do owe you one apology before we get going here, which is that the first link we sent you to this movie was inferior. And I got an email from someone saying, well, this looks like it's really a wonderful film, but all I could see were torsos. So Debbie Schinker immediately corrected that and sent out a second link with to a really good print, and I hope that's what you all took advantage of. So Treva, we will, as we did the last time, we're going to open it up to the audience here to talk about whatever they want to talk about. But first, I want to ask you a few things, and I want to start by asking you a question that I posed when we did the intro, which is, I know you're interested in folklore.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that Cabin in the Sky is an example of the folklore genre. So would you kind of define that for us and explain how Cabin in the Sky fits into what we would call folklore?
Well, the folklore genre is, again, a realm where things are explained through the ability to be able to portray it in a way that people understand, and also in a creative way. In many cultures, animals are used so that there's not this fixation on it's this type of person or that type of person. And often, even in cartoons, what happens is you can really bypass a lot of, well, this was this type of woman or this type of man, by just saying this was a fox and this was a rabbit, right? And so you can tell the story without it being, well, all people who are this type of woman do this. No, it was a fox, right? No pun intended. But one of the things that happens is that there is this push and pull with good and evil, and also the explanation of why things came to be. Recently, I was walking and I was listening to a podcast of African folk tales. And one of them was the tale of Anansi and how he brought stories from the sky so that he could share it with all humanity. And he had to be a trickster to be able to do that, because he was given impossible tasks to be able to bring a ferocious leopard and the most dangerous hornets and a fairy that no one would be able to see. And he had to be creative in catching these various items and entities to be able to take them up to the sky god to then be able to bring stories to everyone. I was just looking in one of my favorite books. This is called Afro-American Folk Tales. And I'm sorry, it's got this shine on it. And there are a lot of stories in here that are both folk tales and fairy tales. And there's also some playing the dozens. And playing the dozens, you know, a lot of times people get to boil it down to your mama jokes, but it's not a your mama thing. It's really a one-upmanship, which is very popular in African American vernacular. And one of the stories in here is from Florida, and it's about how the devil made up a word. And basically, to paraphrase, the devil needed more help. And so he went and got some angels and he put them in his mouth and he put them under his arms. And as he was flying back, a man saw him and said, "Hey, where are you going? You got angels?" And he opened his mouth and said, "Yes." And when he did that, all the angels came out and everything fell out. And so they had to go back and get more. And the second time he did it, the person said, "Hey, are you going back?" And he said, "Mm-hmm." And that's why that word is said that way to this day.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So Trevor, relate what you just said about folklore to Cabin in the Sky and why Cabin in the Sky fits into that sort of category.
Well, Cabin in the Sky,
Is it
if you think
the
about the
good versus
classic,
evil thing?
when you think about the classic, here's the angel and here's the devil on your shoulder, it does that,
Yeah.
but with live full form. And the Ethel Waters character and her ability to pray things into being is also part of the folklore, that there's someone who just believes so strongly that they can sway the course of action for someone else's life. And
Yeah.
little Joe classically backslides, but when he gets to the point where he's actually trying to do the right thing, it's not recognized. And that's something that through his fever dream, he's able to hold on to that part. And it's wonderful because the characterizations of uh, Satan Jr., Lucifer Jr., excuse me, which just gave me the giggles, Lucifer Jr., and also God's General. It's really creative and brings home that idea of that fight from one side to the other. And
Yeah.
Cabin really brings that to life.
And I ran into just a little bit of writing about folklore as a genre the other day that I thought was striking. It said that folklore feels like it's a story that's been told throughout the ages.
Yes.
And that really applies to Cabin in the Sky, which is a very significant film, as you know. I just learned the other day that the Library of Congress selected it for preservation a few years ago as being culturally and aesthetically significant. So that's a big deal. And I know that you like this film a lot. You told me that a couple months ago. You got Ethel Waters, you have Eddie Rochester Anderson, you have Lena Horne, plus great songs, compelling story, characters that we really come to care about as the story is told. And a critic at the time in 1943, when this movie was released, said that this was the most respectful treatment of Black artists ever to appear in the movies up to that time. But that was in 1943. So I want to get your take on that comment. What do we need to make allowances for in this film when we watch it in 2021?
Well, I think that part of it is one of the things that stood out to me, which is really interesting, is when Ethel Waters speaks and when Ethel Waters sings. And there is a shift to a dialect, code switching, if you will. And then she goes back to speaking a different way. And that's something that African Americans and many people from different cultures have had to do for generations. There's also there's an oversimplification on some levels, but that's what makes it so endearing of the struggles that they were going through. I love that scene where he buys her a washing machine and then he says, "Now we just need the electricity to run it." You know? and it's, you know, it's almost like the blues in that you had to laugh to stop from crying on some levels.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that whole idea of we're making it any way we can, but even within the struggle there is beauty. They're dancing in the middle of the kitchen. um you know, the person who's hanging out suddenly breaks out a harmonica and I'm thinking, wow. You know, so there is
Yeah.
that celebration of spirit, and I think that's the most important thing to take away from it, in addition to the incredible talent that's on display.
Oh my Lord. I know. I know. Everybody.
Mhm.
I said to you before we went on that I ran into a quote from Ruby Dee today about this film, and this is worth pondering. She said, Cabin in the Sky was gorgeous, but it was in the context of what Hollywood allowed for Black people.
Mhm.
And she went on to say, the battle to denigrate and declass minorities was in full force in Hollywood. At least Lena was allowed to be beautiful. That's a very interesting point. She was allowed to be beautiful and she could be a sexual object, unlike Black men.
Mhm.
There were no Denzel Washingtons or Morgan Freemans then. Isn't that interesting and compelling?
Well, it is, and it also goes back to something that you said actually in Shuffle Along, which was the line that said that you know, there was discomfort at too much lovemaking. That was the quote.
Yeah, yeah,
But that there are very few recorded images of Black people dancing together
yeah,
in certain ways. You know, like you would say, okay, we're doing a waltz, we're doing this, but there were ways that they were not filmed or not. There was so much about maintaining the structure of what had been established, because the reality was so different from what had been established that it would seem backward. And I think that, you know, at the beginning with Birth of a Nation, and this whole idea of, you know, the terror and the fear and laziness, and that there's this sense that once Blacks were emancipated, that they did not have the ability to to live their own lives with reason. You know, suddenly they were confused about everything. There's a quote that I heard a comedian say, and he said, anytime you hear people saying, you know, well, I built this, or he said, no, you oversaw it, or you supervised it, because the heavy lifting was done by all these people who then suddenly were considered to be less than intelligent for the work that they've already been doing. And I think that one of the things with Cabin in the Sky, I'm so happy that you brought that up. There's a cartoon that I was looking at recently, and it was done by the same man who created the cartooning for Woody Woodpecker. And it was, gosh, what's it called? Scrub, it's something, Scrub the Baby with the, anyway, there's a jazz song that goes with it. And they were so excited about promoting this jazz piece that they put all these caricatures together, and they did not think at all that it was rude or was really horrible. And what happened was they had you know, this portrayal of laziness and this portrayal of unintelligence, and then suddenly a light-skinned woman who had more assimilated hair, straight hair, gets off the bus, or gets off the ferry that comes in, and she's going to teach everybody how to do the boogie woogie, you know. And every other character had braids and twists, and, you know, these just but in a way that it was not meant to be attractive. And the difficulty was that the light-skinned woman, I had never seen a cartoon of that type that showed through a woman's dress. So as she walked, you could see the shape of her body through the dress, and you could see her breasts moving. And it was just so specific. And you would not see that in the counterpart cartooning. And even if you were doing a lampooning of something, it was very specifically done so that you were either unintelligent or hypersexualized. And that was really, but I felt that Lena was able to be, to your point, attractive in a way that was just attractive, and that was really fun.
You know, but even so, yeah, Lena was allowed to be beautiful, as we said a couple of minutes ago, but even that had its limits, didn't it? Because the scene that her big song, really, Ain't It the Truth, was shot, Lena in a bubble bath, and it was cut. And it was cut. And, you know, we talked about Lena more when we did Stormy Weather, but let's repeat it. Lena did more than 10 musicals at MGM. And this is the only one where she was permitted to play a major role. In all of the other films she made at MGM, she did what were called then specialties. So she would sing one or two songs, but they were songs that could easily be cut out of the film when the film was shown in the South. So, but as we say, every time we do one of these films, you got to look at it in the context of when it was made.
And I believe that this film isn't it in the history of this film that they started to show it in the South, and it created a huge backlash, and they had to shut it down. So they didn't.
I didn't know that.
The film at
didn't
all.
know that. Well,
they tried.
Yeah. Trevor and I promise we're going to open this up in just a minute. We don't want this to be about us, but there is one more important thing to add, I think, because we didn't have time, Trevor, in our intro to talk about Eddie Rochester Anderson really at all. And he's major in this film. And our friend Jack Valancy, who couldn't be here tonight, did what he always did. He researched and he came up with a few things about Rochester that are worth sharing. So let me just do a couple bullet points here. Um, uh, he was born in 1905, so he was 38 when he made Cabin in the Sky. And what I didn't know, he made more than 60 films in the 1930s and 40s. He had this long history with Jack Benny, which is how most of us know him. And most of us know him from the TV Jack Benny series, but he did a lot of radio with Benny first. And important, he was the first African-American with a regular role on a nationwide radio program. It was Jack Benny's show. And on television, this is interesting too, Trevor, his role with Benny became less stereotypical as they continued to work together, and he became more and more popular. And one fast story, the Benny radio show went on location to New York City at one point in the 1940s, and there was a couple where the company was staying at a hotel. There was a couple that objected to Rochester being there, and the next day, the entire crew and cast staying in that hotel, plus Jack Benny, they all checked out and moved to another hotel. How about that? Yeah, 2 thumbs up on that. Okay, we're going to open it up, and I have a particular. I want to call on Bridget Emerson to talk about this. This story is about faith and devotion. There's no question about that. It's also about a good woman and a weak man. And Bridget really did some thinking about that and had something pretty interesting to say. Can we ask Bridget to share here?
Thanks, Bill. So, Treva, the folklore aspect that you brought up, there was something that I noticed that we actually see in fairy tales and folklore as well. But it's a really it's been a part of gender relations for centuries. And what I saw is the mythos that a good woman can change a man, and that a good woman is responsible for his well-being, his success, his walking the right path. And I see that acted out here in this show pretty clearly. So societally, we know that this was very overt at the time that this was filmed. I think it still exists today, but it's more covert. So I just wanted to bring that up, that I saw that. This is my 3rd time seeing the film, and I noticed it this time.
And to her own expense as well, yes? The sacrifice, and it's expected that that is the role that she has, that she will continue to just sacrifice and do without, as well, as long as little Joe's okay.
Yes, and that it's her responsibility if he fails.
Yes.
But Bridget, I don't think you'd mind if I added that, and that's what becomes complex about so many of these films. This is also a film that you really like a lot.
Love this film. This is my 3rd time seeing it, like I said, and I love everything about it. I love the way they frame each shot. I love the incidental music between each of the musical numbers and during the dramatic scenes. I love the acting. I love the music. I love everything about it. But like many of the other films we've seen, there are things that as we become more educated, we become more aware of. And this was one thing I noticed this time.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that. Let's really just open this up now and hear from any of you talking about anything you want to talk about. And I hope one of those topics is Vincent Minnelli, who directed it. And this was his very first full-length directing assignment. I think he knocked the ball out of the park.
Yes. I saw Mr. Ferguson, Arthur Ferguson.
Oh, yes, Arthur will for sure have something to say.
Well, first, I want to say that Ethel Waters displayed, particularly at the beginning, an extraordinary facility with the acting. She reminded me most of Spencer Tracy in the naturalism of her presentation. It didn't seem like acting. And at the deathbed scene, it was or the first deathbed scene, it was as affecting as Cagney in Yankee Doodle Dandy.
High compliment.
The other is, this was right in the tradition, the Hollywood tradition, of what is now known as film blanc, where you have supernatural elements before and during and a little bit after World War II, where death is not the end. This is right in the tradition of A Guy Named Joe, Spencer Tracy, 1943, Stairway to Heaven, shortly after World War II, with the same walking up the stairway. That's A Matter of Life and Death, with Powell and Pressburger. You have Carousel. You have Here Comes Mr. Jordan. You have Lubitsch's Heaven Can Wait, where there is hope. All of the people in World War I, particularly in Britain, and a whole generation of young people were lost. You had to believe, and this is part of that very strong tradition. You also have The Devil and Daniel Webster, where you have the battle. You have the fight in front of a jury in Devil and Daniel Webster, with a terrible scene in that for where blacks are used for a party, which trivializes them. I don't know if you know that movie, The Devil and Daniel Webster. And Stairway to Heaven ends up in a trial. The Powell and Pressburger, a movie. So this is, and you have Our Town, where you have the very controversial film version where they wake up at the end. So this is established in that very tradition of Hollywood at that time.
At that time. Yeah, interesting. And we should take a few more minutes to talk about Ethel Waters. Trevor, you gave her a lot of attention in the intro that we did together. How important she was. And Arthur, what you're saying about her acting is so true. I mean, I have a lot of her recordings. She was a great singer, but she was a great actor. And as you pointed out, Trevor, she won an Oscar for Pinky, but
nominated.
Nominated, sorry. Yeah. We should have pointed out as well how what an immortal performance she gave in Carson McCullers' Member of the Wedding. First on Broadway in 1946, and then she repeated her role in film in 1952, singing. This is a quiz. Do anybody remember what she sang in that show? This became really one of her signatures, this and another song. Nobody? She sang His Eye is on the Sparrow in Member of the Wedding. Great.
I just wanted to say that I would say that her acting was fearless in that, you know, so many actresses in particular are so focused on looking attractive, and she did whatever she needed to do for the part. And that just came across. I think that's part of that naturalism that you're talking about, Arthur. And then the other thing, and this links back to the last show that we did live, Bill, is that I was singing Supper Time. And I found a clip of her being introduced by Diana Ross on a television show, and she was phenomenal.
Well, tell them, remind them what that song is about.
This song is about a woman who has learned that her husband has been lynched, and she doesn't know how to tell her children. She doesn't know how to go on. She focuses on supper time, but as she's talking about supper time, she talks about, well, how am I going to tell them, and what do I do? But it's supper time, and it's almost like you're seeing her finding the will to keep going, but at the same time acknowledging it. It's a painful piece, and she didn't even finish, and I thought it was so beautiful. She didn't even finish the last line. She just broke down in tears, and it was just you felt every word. It was so beautiful. She didn't have to
And
say it. You knew what she was going to say, but she was in it. She was so in it.
And you know, Treva, I mean, that's a 1935 song by Irving Berlin, and it's become a standard, but a lot of people don't know what that song is about. So thank you for sharing that. And, you know, we made the point that she was intensely spiritual,
Yes.
and that really centers this film. She got
Mhm.
along great with Vincent Minnelli, who directed it, but as you pointed out in the intro, she said, God is my director. And that just sort of opens up this film and what we find in it and what makes it so rich, don't you think?
Yes, most definitely. I see that Stephen Bell has his hand up.
Good for you. Thank you. Stephen,
Bravo.
talk to us.
Hi there. You've just covered a lot of what I was going to say.
Oh,
Good, we're doing our
The
job.
thing is, over the years, I'm very aware of Ethel Waters, but only in her member of the wedding persona, the older woman, the older comforting and like Mother Earth type of figure and things of that sort.
Yeah.
I've known for many years that Ethel Waters was considered the most popular Black performer in America or in the world or whatever, you know, at a certain point in time. But I never really knew her. I knew her recordings. I know her recordings of the songs from As Thousands Cheer, you know, Heat Wave
Yeah.
and Supper Time and various other songs that she's done over the years. But I was just blown away with the charisma and the talent just jumping off the TV screen in her songs and in her scenes and when she was dancing, the fun that she had, and boy, those high kicks and everything. You know, this is not the old woman that I was used to. This is such a vital and engaging performer. She with so much charisma. I was really taken aback by how wonderful she really was.
You know, it's interesting because that sequence, if you notice, they both sang the same song. It was originally supposed to be reversed, but then Lena broke her ankle, which is why she was put onto the bar. And so she ended up singing the ballad version, and that's how you got those high kicks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just side note, again, continuing this this line of her spirituality, I think it's so interesting that at the end of her life, Stephen, she was touring with Billy Graham. You know, I mean, she was just absolutely consistent. But this is interesting too. I mean, nobody's a saint, right? And you guys may know, I can't remember, Treva, if you pointed this out or not, that Ethel Waters and Lena Horne did not get along well. And in fact, there are only really two scenes that they play together that are important scenes, and they were not shot until the end of the shooting schedule because they did not get along well. And Ethel Waters resented Lena. And it's a very interesting question to ponder that. Lena, in her memoirs, is very generous to Ethel Waters. And this is an important point too. Lena said the whole system held Ethel back and exploited her. And that's how she explained a certain amount of anger that she could see in Ethel Waters in 1943. And I think there was probably another reason for the resentment as well. This is moving into trivia territory, but it's important trivia if that's possible. You know, it was Ethel Waters who introduced the song Stormy Weather by Harold Arlen and Ted Koehler in one of the Cotton Club reviews. But when the film Stormy Weather was made, also in 1943, that song was given to Lena Horne. And I have to believe that was very hurtful to Ethel Waters because it was, I mean, Ethel Waters used to perform Stormy Weather at the Cotton Club and get 7 encores. but that song was in a way taken away from her. And as we all know, we think of it now as Lena Horne's song, but it was not. It was Ethel Waters' song.
But with Lena Horne, it was a ballad. And when Ethel Waters did it, it was jazzy. If you listen to her recording of Stormy Weather, it's nothing like Lena's.
Yeah, good point.
Until
Good point.
Lena sang it at the end in her one-woman show, which was more jazzy.
Yeah.
I was going to say that Judy and Bruce Amsel have had their hands up for a while. They must be tired.
Three quickies. One, when Judy and I were redcoats at Playhouse Square, there used to be the traveling black shows that came around that were essentially the same theme as this show with worse language.
Mhm.
But it always ended up the woman saving the man.
They call that the Chitlin Circuit.
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
Number two is this is the third time I've seen this film also, but I'd completely forgotten the ending of it when this came in, and I was really surprised. And number three, during the fight scene when the tornado shows up, I was looking for Margaret Hamilton and Toto.
Yeah. And it's footage from Wizard of Oz. Yes, correct. Well spotted. Yeah.
Yes, I just
Yeah.
wanted to just throw out there, even though they're not musicals, but that's how Tyler Perry got started. He was on that circuit with all of those shows, and they are the same themes. And talk about folklore and the repeating themes. That has been the archetype for a very long time.
I
And
want
there's always prayer or gospel music also. It's always
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
I want to point out, because this is the third time that we've seen it. It was so culturally important. This is the third time in this series that we have seen a famous big band used in a film musical. First with Tommy Dorsey in Girl Crazy, then it was Harry James in Best Foot Forward, and in this film, Duke Ellington, of course, with in Cabin in the Sky. And we even see Louis Armstrong make sort of a cameo appearance in an acting role, which is totally cool, right?
Yes. I love all the characters, Manton Moreland and Stephen Fetchit and Louis Armstrong, and the bouncing off and the different textures of voices alone. You've got Louis going, well, I don't know, and then you've got it. Just the energy was just really fun. Okay, Linda.
And Trevor,
Yes.
well, but we'll get to you. We will get to you. But I want Trevor just comment on Butterfly McQueen, because she's important and she doesn't have a large part in this film, but it's still notable. Say something about Butterfly McQueen. Butterfly McQueen
Was again in the same place as the other actresses of this time of color, and she was only allowed to do certain types of roles. And some people say, it's okay to be typecast because you're being cast, but if you start out, when she started out, she thought, oh, I'll play this maid because that's how you get started, and then I'll move on to other roles. But the other roles were not coming, they were not available. And because of her high voice, she was often put in a place where she played someone simple-minded. And I felt like in this one, she was able to be an equal, and that she was a supportive friend, and it wasn't about her being unintelligent at all. She was just her friend from church and her neighbor, and that was so refreshing to see her like that. I also, personal note, last night screened a film of A Midsummer Night's Dream that I did with Laurel's 6th grade. It's a 30+ year tradition. Because of COVID, we had to film it. Do you know that Butterfly McQueen got her nickname because of the butterfly dance in Midsummer Night's Dream? So,
Oh, really?
Yeah. So she would move her hands like this so much that they nicknamed her Butterfly, and she didn't like the name Thelma, so she officially changed her name to Butterfly.
Well, this is real trivia, but I may be right or wrong about this. Arthur Ferguson would probably know. I think that the production you're talking about was a swing version of a little night of Midsummer Night's Dream that was called Swing in the Dream in 1939. And
Wow.
Louis Armstrong was in that. Maxine Sullivan was in that. I think that's how that happened.
Okay.
but I could be wrong. But
Yeah,
you know,
but she
Butterfly
also was
McQueen.
she also started out as a dancer, and she danced with Catherine Dunham.
Oh yeah, your hero.
Yeah.
And you know, I will quote Butterfly McQueen's most famous line. It's in Gone with the Wind, and it's an embarrassing line for us now. The line is, "Don't know nothing about birthing no babies." And I think, Trevor, you and I may have read the same account interview with her, because she said, "I didn't mind playing a maid the first time,
Yeah.
but after I did the first thing over and over, I resented it. I didn't mind being funny, but I didn't like being stupid."
Yes.
Very significant. Was it Linda who had her hand up? Am I right about that?
Yes, Linda.
Linda, talk to us.
Okay, I've got several bits of trivia because I've admired Ethel Waters for decades.
Good.
She wrote a memoir called His Eye is on the Sparrow.
Yes.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's
Right.
available anymore, but I read it many years ago. When she was a shapely young woman, she was known as Sweet Mama Stringbean on the Black
Oh,
Vaudeville circuit. And she was
really?
really, really great looking. Yeah, you may be able to find pictures of her online when she was young, like in her 20s. And the other bit is in the show As Thousands Cheer,
Yep.
when it was time for curtain calls,
Oh,
two of the main white performers didn't want to take curtain calls with her. And
Yep.
Irving Berlin, they spoke to Irving Berlin about it, and he said, "I will respect your opinion. If you don't want to have curtain calls with her, we won't have curtain calls."
yeah.
They backed
Yeah.
out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
and I think,
famous story.
yes, I was going to say, Bill, I think also that's part of it, also part of the rivalry also, which we touched on a little bit in Stormy Weather, but the idea of colorism and who was allowed to be attractive or who was allowed to be perceived to be attractive. And given their difference in color, also, Lena was lighter, and that was part of
Uh-huh.
acceptance.
Yeah. See what you guys think about. Oh, I'm sorry, Linda. Did you have another comment? I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, that's a famous story about the curtain call. One of the actors who didn't want to share the curtain call with Ethel Waters was Clifton Webb, and I can't remember who the other performer was. Arthur, do you remember who the other performer was?
I thought the other one was a female, but I can't remember.
It is.
Yeah, but there were
Nope.
two females, and I've seen different opinions over which one it was, so I don't want to mention any names.
Okay.
Well, actually, that reminds me, their refusal to take curtain calls reminds me of Justice Vandevanter and Louis Brandeis.
Hmm.
And I think it was Vandevanter on the Supreme Court, he refused to be in the court picture when Brandeis was named to the court. It's
Oh.
the only time that
Really?
all 9 members were not in a picture together.
Mm-hmm.
The same degree of prejudice. And
Yep.
unfortunately, he couldn't be removed from the Supreme Court.
I
Yeah.
learned that story because my daughter, who is now a sophomore in college, her first choice originally was Brandeis, and the history of Brandeis, that Leonard Bernstein started writing West Side Story there, and they are actually called I think they're the Justices. That's their mascot.
Oh,
Based on Brandeis, like that. So it's an interesting college.
so you
Two
learned that
things.
story, Trevor?
Yes,
About
they
the justice?
actually tell that story at the intro to Families. So when you go and you're getting your orientation, they talk about that. It was the only college I went to when they actually talked about social justice in their intro.
Cool.
Mm.
Excellent. Two things in the chat that are worth repeating. Well, more than two, but we have time for two. Mark Reni's wanted everyone to know that there's a very good biography of Ethel Waters by Donald Bogle, Bogle. It's called Heatwave. Thank you for that,
Mhm.
Mark. I didn't know that the book existed. And Debbie Schinker, God bless her, says, "Let's talk about the choir. They were phenomenal." Partly that's because Debbie Schinker's in a choir, but also she's right. this was the Hall Johnson Choir, the preeminent African-American choir in America at that time. And they are phenomenal in this movie. Anybody want to comment on that? Debbie, do you want to say anything more other than that that they were phenomenal?
Well, I just thought it was neat how they worked them in, especially at the beginning at the church scene where you have the kids singing, which was clearly like a kids choir, but they seated them together so that from a choral perspective, they could hear each other and sing. And then it was obvious that the rest of the congregants, right, were the rest of the choir. So it wasn't like in the scenes in the various movies with the orchestras, where the orchestras were still their own entity, but kind of plopped into the plot. The choirs were integrated into the plot as characters. And I just thought it really added to the ambiance of the movie.
Yeah, Vincent Minnelli had a lot to do with that. And I want to add about Vincent Minnelli, because I think this is a very important quote. He said that my feeling at that time was that Black artists wanted to see themselves as glamorous as possible. Now we know that he made sure that that happened with Lena Horne, but Trevor, I think it's also true of Kenneth Spencer as the Lord's General and Rex Ingram as Lucifer Jr. I think it's true. He was consistent in making sure that that element of glamour was there for all the actors in the film. And I think that's one of the things that does make the film very respectful. You know?
Yes, I mean, just as in Stormy Weather, seeing the glamour and seeing the poise was really important.
Boy,
I wanted to say two things. One is that I don't want to leave without saying that one of the most important things about Cabin in the Sky to me is the simple showing of community. Supportive community, structured community, relatable community. Because in society, for many years, there's been this sense that, well, we live differently, but this shows here is a community. That scene, that lovely scene on the riverbank, when they all kind of gather in, they kind of sing, they're like, what's going on? And they all know Little Joe. And even in that scene that you're talking about, Debbie, they're passing the note back like, Little Joe's coming, Little Joe's, he's in the building, Little Joe. I mean, and it's just, you get this sense that they are a community that has known each other for a long time. The other thing I wanted to say is that it reminds me of the Shuffle Along creators talking about how some of the promoters that wanted to have them perform wanted them to perform in overalls, and they always dressed in tux and tails, and that this whole idea, and I'm blanking on her name, one of you will know her name, very famous pianist. She had she was the first wife of Thurgood Marshall, but she was blacklisted. But she was in several movies, amazing pianist. Pearl was her first name. But she rubbed people the wrong way because she insisted that the other actors would be dressed beautifully. And she was constantly told they should be wearing rags and this. And she said, why? Why would they be wearing rags? And to have to explain to people, this is not the way we would dress. It seems like something you wouldn't have to say, but it was something that it needed to be represented. And I think that was part of what was so difficult when it was cut out in the South, because that perception remained there because they never saw the examples of the truth.
Right.
That was hard.
And I just want to underline your observation about community and go back to the Hall Johnson Choir, because for me, the Hall Johnson Choir is symbolic of the community and sort of, and is used all the way through. It keeps coming back to that choir as anchoring the community. Very powerful, very powerful.
Yes. Steve has had his hand up for a while.
Yeah, I was just thinking, as I watched the movie, and I've seen it, several times before, besides Butterfly McQueen, I recognize numerous other actors, some bit parts in it. The gentleman who played the male house servant in Gone with the Wind, Tara, is in it in a bit part. Willie Best. And in all those other movies, they play manservants and maids, and it just breaks my heart when I see it, the missed potential. Here they're given this chance to really shine, have great roles, and this is about it. And they were back to playing manservants and maids, and that's the heartbreaking part of it. And then unrelated to that, on a happier note, was Vincent Minnelli being his first film, how visually stunning this movie is. That
Yes, thank you. Say more about
the
that.
set design and all that he's going to become famous for, you see it in this movie, that it's just, you know, it's beautiful to look at. So
Beautiful to look at it. And his decision made early on to shoot it in with a sepia tint is one of the most notable things about the film. You know,
I was telling
Gord-
Bill that one of my favorite moments is the entryway into the club where everyone, it's like this kinetic, this group is rocking side to side, this one's going front and back, and there's this whole step. You can feel the energy before you even go into the club. And then as they enter, there's that amazing where everybody moves in a line so that they're almost carrying the main characters through. Oh, I just love that. I love it.
yeah.
Alan Stewart is there.
Okay, and then we want to get to Herb Drower.
Just a quick question. One of the other amazing performers was Bubbles, and the evil.
Oh, John Bubbles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Comment on him. It just like talent dripped from him.
Oh, yes.
He was
The
amazing.
the original Sport and Life in Porgy and Bess. Yeah.
And he was someone who Fred Astaire greatly admired. He trained Fred Astaire in some things as well. He had an inimitable style, and unlike Bill Robinson, Bill worked more on the front of his feet, and Bubbles worked more on the back. And you see some early examples of the moonwalk in there. And just the showmanship going up the stairs, and that moment where he's sort of checking himself out in the mirror at the landing of the stairs. This is something, you may know this, but this just blew my mind. So it is no secret that Michael Jackson loved great performers and borrowed from many of them, including Fred.
Was inspired.
Yes, inspired by. I did not know. He really loved John Bubbles, watched a lot of his movies. And did you know that is why he named his chimpanzee Bubbles?
No.
I just thought it was random. He was honoring John Bubbles, the dancer. I thought, wow.
Excellent. That's great. That's great. Herb Drower is with us once again from Boston, and I always like to check in with him. Herb, was this the first time you had seen this movie?
Yes, it was, and I enjoyed it very much. I'll tell you what, I was very stricken with the voice of the Lord General. What was his name? He had just a beautiful voice. And I'm thinking it's a shame that Lucas didn't pick him up to play instead of James Earl Jones. I think he had such a wonderful, what was his name? Ingram or?
Rex Ingram.
Yes,
who had been in the Broadway production of this before it was turned into a film. Yeah.
And I had a question. When they made the film, was there any changes made to get a Black audience to see it, or was there no such thing as a Black audience? Or what was the theater going public, both the stage show and the movie?
Well, I think that once people heard that it was a Black cast, they were going to see it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because
well, I know the dancing was very popular in the 40s.
But there were only two. There were only two in the 40s. So imagine you don't get to see yourself. You're going to go and support it in hopes that they would make more.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
But the dancing, but the Black dancing became during World War II. A lot of the dancing was Black inspired, and I wonder if
absolutely.
Yeah. And
or appropriated. Yeah. Definitely.
But they did a wonderful job. I thought the dignity of the character was important. Not that I don't think they would do it today the same way. But considering it was
for that time.
But considering 43, I thought especially Ethelward of such dignity that she had, such character. And Rochester was Rochester. He did what he always did on Jack Benny, but he was still one of the funniest, one of the best.
He also was a very ingratiating singer, didn't you think? He has.
Yes, I did. I was
Yeah.
on it at one time. Yeah,
Gravelly voice.
That voice was something.
It's something. Boy, this has been information packed, and we're coming up on an hour, so we're going to move on to our weekly miscellany, and there are 4 items that we want to cover. Treva, it always falls on the shoulders of the co-host to announce the next film in the series. Do it.
Yeah, are you ready for this? All right. So it's time to go backwards, to go forwards, and to really celebrate a grand vixen of the film world through the movie I'm No Angel. And that is starring Mae West and Cary Grant. And, you know, she was a legendary sex symbol from the 30s, and she was no angel.
And she was also, I've always thought of her as a proto-feminist.
Oh, definitely.
So we'll get the evidence when we see that film.
And I think that's part of, yeah, I was going to say that's one of the things that's so funny is that she was considered dangerous because she knew what she wanted and she said what she wanted.
Got it. And she got it. Yeah,
Yes.
Absolutely. It's great. You're going to love seeing this film again or for the first time. Number 2 out of our 4 miscellany pieces, even though Cabin in the Sky was our 25th film, I can't believe that we've done 25 of these. Treva graciously agreed that we should postpone the party until film 26, because then Bob Knoll will be back with us, and he's done almost all of them with us. So when we get to the next film, which is the Mae West film, in 3 weeks, I urge you to bring the beverage of your choice. and we will toast Mae West and Cary Grant, and we will toast ourselves, because so many of you just keep coming to these time after time, and we really think that's great. As usual, my intro for the film will go out the week before we do the conversation.
Bill, I just have a quick question. Is it wrong to toast Mae West with a Shirley Temple?
I think that's deliciously ironic. We should think about that. So the next discussion is Thursday, June 7, or no, sorry, June 17. That's when we will do our toasts. Here again is the slide that we show you every time. It's our invitation to you to make a donation to TMTP tonight, if and only if you enjoyed this discussion and the intro that Treva and I did that came out earlier in the week. As always, any amount that is meaningful to you is meaningful to us, and we really appreciate that. And so now, number 4. This is when I share a lyric with you by the lyricist of the film that you saw this past week. In this case, there were 2 lyricists, both of them great. Yip Harburg, who worked with Harold Arlen, and John Latouche, who worked with Vernon Duke. But I thought I would share with you at least a piece of the lyric that was from the song that got cut, Lena Horne's big scene in the bubble bath, because it's great. It's a song called Ain't It the Truth. We don't have time for the whole thing, but here's a piece of it. Life is short, short, brother. Ain't it the truth? And there is no other. Ain't it the truth? You got to grab that rainbow while you still got your youth. Ain't it the dignified truth? Was a man called Adam. Ain't it the truth? Said, now look here, madam. Ain't it the truth? You gotta bite that apple while you still got that tooth. Ain't it the mellow truth? Get that new religion. Ain't it the truth? Before you is dead pigeon. Ain't it the truth? Because when you're laid horizontal in that telephone booth, there'll be no breathing spell. That's only natural. Ain't it the gospel truth? Isn't that great? Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg at their best. So it's time for Treva and Debbie and me and Colleen to say good night and thank you, and to wish you all a happy holiday weekend. And we'll see you again in 3 weeks. We're going to move to the diehards. And I need to say about the diehards that, you know, this is just a funny way of saying that we have found that there are people who want to keep talking about a movie even after we've been talking about it for an hour. But they're not pretentious about it. They're just interesting people like the rest of us. So if you've never stuck around for the Die Hard segment, we urge you to do that. And we will start that in about 45 seconds. In the meantime, we all say good night to those of you who are leaving us. Bye-bye.